So I tried to start this a couple times. First, my boss showed up right when I started, and he needed a part. And then after that, the coffee kicked in the second time around, and nature was calling. But something I've been thinking about a lot, and I kind of wanted to talk about it days ago, is prayer and how we should pray. Does God answer prayer? Does God answer any prayer? Any desire? Why does it seem like God doesn't answer prayer? You know? And yeah, how does He answer prayer? This has been something that has. It's been a topic of. It's been a subject that I've thought so much about. I've talked to people about. I've just gone through the Bible, looking up every reference to prayer and how we should pray. I've watched all the sermons. All the sermons. I mean, you can't. I haven't heard a theory or an idea explaining prayer. There's none. There's no, at least no mainstream ideas and views on it that I haven't heard already, because I've listened to all the preachers, the charismatics, the Baptists, the I don't know, you go down the line, right? And I've even listened to some of the New Age type deal, like Law of Attraction and all those. I've read books. I've read books that are biblical books on prayer by what you might consider, just typical evangelical pastors. And then I've read books on prayer by like businessmen, and what that looks like. And there's a lot of varying in the belief. And there's a couple camps. There's one camp that says you pray for something that you need and you ask and you add to that prayer if it is in your will, Lord, right? And if it's in God's will, what you're asking for, He'll bring it about. And if He doesn't, He won't. And I think a lot of us have heard God either says yes, no, or wait. It's not a Bible verse. At least I haven't read that Bible verse and I haven't found it, right? Sounds good, but. And then there's another camp. Actually, there's a few camps, but another one I'm thinking about is that God will answer your prayer. It's just a matter of time and a matter of persistence, And I think I land in the latter, though I think most Christians end up in the former. Because there's so much seemingly unanswered prayer that it's hard to believe when Jesus says, if you abide in me and I abide in you, anything you ask, it'll be done for you. Or ask and you'll receive. It's a very simple statement, but it's also a very bold statement. And there's books written on it. Actually, there's not a ton of debate about it in the church. There's not a lot of sermons on prayer. Quite frankly, a lot of churches they waste their pulpit time talking about subjects and things that sound good and they think will keep the people coming in, and just, a little uplifting sermon, but not too uplifting, and gotta remind people they're sinners. And then send everyone out the door. So, I've grown up going to church my whole life, and it's kind of crazy that, I'm in my mid-20s reading and trying to learn more about prayer. It's like you feel like, if the church was doing its job, they would have taught me. Maybe I wasn't listening, I don't know. So, anywho. So something I've been thinking about, I've been trying to look into my own life and figure out, how has God been answering prayer in my life? And I have a couple examples. Of course, they're, just country boy type things. So they're probably very boring and they sound dumb. But that's just what's been going on recently. It's hunting season and I'm trying to get more into hunting and I love to fish. So, the one is earlier this year. I might have talked about it in another video, or I guess at this point, the first video. But I was going for a new PB for a catfish. I like to catfish, and I was putting in a lot of work. I was buying new tackle, new hooks, bigger hooks, higher quality line, upgrading my gear a lot. Because I've been fishing all my life, but I've never caught anything crazy big. And so anyways, I've been watching all the videos and learning, and part of that is upgrading your gear and where you fish and the bait you get. And I built a bait tank and got a vacuum sealer and was freezing all my bait and stuff like that. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself. I think the point is that, like, every time I fished, I prayed to catch something, right? And then I kind of upgraded my prayer to catch something bigger. Catch something in the 20-pound range. Catch something, new PB. And the Lord answered my prayer. But it didn't happen every time I prayed, right? Because I pray pretty much every time I go out there to catch a fish, to catch a big one. And there's a lot of times I go out there and don't catch anything, right? But then after like 4 or 5 nights against skunked, I caught a 30-pounder. It was like a 28-pounder. So the Lord did answer my prayer, but there's a lot of times that I was praying, a lot of nights that I sat out there all night and didn't get anything, right? But at the end of the day, I did get a PB. But you could argue that I just prayed to get a fish and, I didn't get a fish that time, right? But what I was thinking is, at the core, I was praying to be able to catch bigger fish more consistently. I feel like that was the core of my prayer, even though it came out as, Lord, help me catch a fish today while I'm here. And I didn't catch a fish every time I went. There's a lot of times I went that I didn't catch anything. But I know that I've gotten better, and I'm wondering if that is how God answers prayer. He answers the core of your prayer, which is, help me be a guy who can catch big fish. Or at least big relative to what I've been catching growing up. And I've kind of become that, or started to become that. And there was a lot of days where I just wasn't catching anything, right? And it seemed like God wasn't answering my prayer. But even recently I had an incident where I went fishing with a buddy. I was getting off work and I was just getting my bow adjusted, my compound bow. And he's like, I'm going to be out, at this lake. And I'm like, I get home. I said, I might join. I don't know. I'll text you. And I get home and, I just decide, yeah, I'll do it. I text him. I'm like, all right, I'll be down there. It's already, I didn't get down there till like 8:30, but one of my roommates was gone and the other one had some girl over in his room. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to just sit in the living room and, do nothing. But so I went, and I didn't bring all my gear. I brought like 2 poles. I didn't bring a chair, which I normally bring a chair. I brought him some coffee. I put on a pot, but I didn't even bring my landing net. I just didn't bring much. And I was like, I'm kind of going just for this kid. And it was a kid that, I call him a kid. He's like 19. But I taught him to fish. I put him on his first fish this year, and he was just hooked. I put him on his second fish this year, maybe even third, I don't know. And now he's going by himself, and he's like learned, right? And it's that idea, you teach a man to fish. I mean, I've experienced that, you know. I've been telling him, you know, just like what knots to learn and stuff, and he's just really done such a great job at it. So we go, and yeah, I'm getting long-winded with it. But we go, and that night I catch two new PBs. Not necessarily in the order of, you know, I catch the largest one first, but and then I catch one that ties my PB. All three of them within a few hours of each other, which is very unlikely and not impossible. But you know, I catch another. I kept right off the bat. I catch a 45 pounder, which I don't know if you've seen a 45-pound catfish, but they're big. And then I catch a 37 pounder, I think, and then I catch a 27 pounder. And it is just a fun freaking night. I mean, you can see I still got the knuckle scars from holding these fish. They like to bite. I also have a work scar from, it's not poison ivy or anything. And you know, I don't even know how hard I prayed that night to catch something, but I'm just thinking of that cumulative effect of my prayers leading up to that moment. And I thought to myself, I'm like, man, I'm just getting lucky, right? Because this kid was not catching anything. Bless his heart. It was so funny. He was like, what the heck? I invite you to come. But at the same time, you know, he hasn't worked as hard as I have, prayed as hard as I had, read as much, watched as much on this topic, or invested as much. And he's catching more fish now that he's, you know, putting in the time and the money and everything. But I know he hadn't tried nearly as hard as I had, prayed nearly hard as I had. And it kind of is funny that prayer seems to go with trying, right? If it's something you truly want, you're going to be trying at the same time, you know, but you're also going to be praying at the same time. Now, if you're praying for something, but you give no effort to it, it's like, how badly do you want that, right? And yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm in that boat, you know, but anyways, the story goes, you know, I thought for a little bit, man, I don't deserve this. This is crazy. How'd this happen? And then I thought to myself, well, think about all the times you've prayed. You've prayed a ton, and you just caught three fish that a lot of guys go fishing their whole life and don't see. You know, now the pros, now they catch them, you know, all the time. But my dad had never caught anything like that, and I don't know. Anyways, So then I was like, no, you know, I've prayed so much and I've had a lot of skunked nights, but I've also tried so hard because of those skunked nights. And I've become someone who knows the right bait, the right hook, the right place. And a lot of that is left to luck after that, right? But you're learning those things. And it's like the more you try, the harder you try, the more you practice, the luckier you get. And I've experienced that recently. And then I'm thinking about hunting, right? I've been praying, man. Remember, 2 years ago, I first hunted. I hunted the whole year, didn't catch anything. And I prayed every time I go out to kill something. And then I go hunting with a buddy earlier this year, or earlier this season. And I kill a doe. And I am just ecstatic, right? And I remember just, you know, every time I go out, it's the same thing. I'd be praying for, and honestly, it came to a point where I was praying for a buck every single time, you know, because that's what you really want. You want something you can mount. You want something with antlers. I mean, both are great. Both have meat on them. And I remember I missed, man, I want to say two bucks in the span of a few days. You know, we were hunting most of the day. So, but still, like, wow, two opportunities lost. I was praying so hard and I screwed it up. And it was because of lack of skill, right? Lack of aiming, lack of knowing when to shoot, lack of skill. But I still prayed so hard. I mean, so hard. And then the last hunt, it was an extended weekend, like Friday through Monday or something. The last hunt, we go out, and I've been praying. I think actually before this hunt, I got on my knees and was just praying a long prayer, man. It wasn't like a short in the stand of prayer, but just pleading for God to give me a good buck. After I missed two. And the funny thing is, after I missed those two, I got so frustrated that during my free time, they're out there eating food and watching the football game in the hunting cabin, and I'm out there shooting a target for hours, just listening to music, jamming with my coffee, just shooting. Different positions, freehand, braced up. It was a crossbow at the time. It was actually this bad boy right here. But yeah, I was just so frustrated. So I get in the stand, last hunt. Well, getting to the stand, I spook a deer that was by my stand, and that means, that's not a good sign, because now they know you're here. I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to get in the stand, because we're all here hunting. But I probably ruined the hunting trip, or at least for that time. And I get in the stand, and I hadn't even put an arrow in my bow that I hear some noise in the woods. And I just know immediately. I'm not even going to look and try to figure out where this thing's coming from or where it's at. I'm not going to wait for it. I had no arrow in my bow. I just get the arrow in my bow. I get situated. I think I moved my backpack a little bit. Just in time for them to come around. A doe with a big buck. Big for me. 10-pointer. Following her. And she comes right up to my tree and lays down. I could have spat on her. Lays down right below my tree. And I'm telling you, this was a few minutes in the stand. I hadn't been there 3 minutes, I don't think. I had just got to the stand. I hadn't even sit down, I don't think. So, and he hangs around, and eventually she somehow spots me. She doesn't spook, but she doesn't feel comfortable. So man, deer is so funny. So she gets up and leaves, and then this buck takes off. I'm like, there goes my chance, and there's a small window in the canopy because a lot of the leaves are up and they were not in an ideal spot for me. But I pre-aim there, and he comes across, and I make a noise like to stop him, and I don't even know if it worked. I just slapped the trigger. It wasn't even good. It wasn't even good trigger pulling technique, but he came through that little window, and I just nailed him in the back, and then shot a second shot to finish him, and it like grazed him, and I was like, oh no. So I just get down as quick as I can, put an arrow through in my teeth, and go finish him off. But anyways, and I'm gonna get that sucker mounted, of course, obviously. But the Lord answered my prayer in a crazy way. And he answered it through a lot of luck, but also practicing, because I screwed up twice. I'm like, that was my answered prayer, This deer 20, 30 yards away, that was my answered prayer, 35 yards away. And I missed it, right? And I missed it because it was on me. And God's like, you know what? In some ways I view it, he's like, your aim is not good enough. I just showed you twice. I want to answer your prayer, but I'm also not going to just stick that deer in your lap, right? It's no fun if you don't earn it. There's no fun in it. It's like a blessing, but you also earn it. It's It's hard to understand that, but I think those two can go side by side. And yeah, I think we think in our heads we want it immediately and we'll be satisfied, but it's like I think God wants us to enjoy that journey, especially I'm thinking with fishing and hunting. Like, what if every time I asked, you know, to catch a fish, I just caught a fish right then and there? I would probably stop going fishing because it's no longer challenging. Therefore, it's no longer fun because you getting better and catching those bigger fish in those tougher scenarios, it's no longer impressive because it doesn't require skill. You just pray to God and boom, it's there. And I'm thinking the deer too, same thing. Pray for that buck. God gave me 2 opportunities. I screwed it up. I was like, what the heck? That was my, why couldn't you guide my arrow? And it's like, no, dude, he wants you to get better. He wants you to have that buck, but he knows, you got to get better. Your aim sucks. So that's something I've been thinking about in regards to prayer. Maybe you've got something you're praying for. You definitely have something you're praying for sure. And something you've probably been praying for a long time. And I really do believe God answers our desires. And it's not a crazy idea because there's so many scripture references. So many. I mean, Jesus' words, everything, which, it's hard to misinterpret unless you have a seminary degree, in which case it's pretty easy to twist into something else. It's easy to misinterpret if you have a seminary degree. But if you're just a simple person, which is the type of people that Jesus was talking to, it's pretty straightforward, and I don't think he was trying to be misleading. Now, when you're asking and seeking and knocking, maybe that's what, upgrading your fishing gear is. Out in the yard practicing for hours. Maybe that's the type of asking, seeking, knocking that he wants. But the tough thing is when you're asking a lot and you're not seeing any results, right? I'm blessed to have seen results both in my fishing and my hunting. Results from my prayer. But along the way, it was very discouraging, losing a buck, your first buck, twice, 2 times, man. That's discouraging. That is so discouraging. And going fishing for 6 hours at a time or plus, more than that, out in the cold, and not catching anything, no activity for, a few days in a row, that's very discouraging too. But I got to see results, and I think you will too, if you keep asking, seeking, and knocking. And I'm kind of preaching to myself too, because there's definitely some stuff I just want to give up on, right? I think there's a lot of us guys, we're in different stages. A lot of times what we're dealing with, it's usually related to money, work, or women. Those are some big ones, right? And if you follow politics at all, I mean, man, it can get so depressing, what we're dealing with. The housing prices, the women, man, women are crazy. They've all been misled and lied to, and just, they've been deceived, right? Just like Eve in the garden, they've been deceived to think all kinds of wrong things, to look for the wrong things in a man. They've been deceived by their culture to seek attention, and now I'm kind of going on a separate rant. But, I've dated these girls. I've gone out with girls where, you think they're solid, and you're like, you're a whore. You find it out. You're surprised. You're like, I wouldn't guess that. You don't have any face tattoos or any whatever, and then you find out this girl's been sleeping around a ton, or she's just addicted to her phone, or maybe she's been deceived into entirely having an entirely different view on marriage and relationships, and she no longer respects, or is able to really respect you as a future husband, as a leader, whatever. I mean, I think that can change, right? But a lot of women are raised like that. They don't have that respect for men or anything like that, right? And then that's part and parcel to a larger story with our culture. But but yeah, anyways, that it can get discouraging, and I just speak to that because that's where I'm at, and that's where a lot of my friends are at too. And not that I'm perfect, but yeah, I've been very disappointed in, you know, the girls I've talked to, and not even really dated, but just tried to see if they'd be someone I'd want to date. And then you go out a little bit, go out a few times, and you're just like, wow. And you keep running into that. And I run into that in the church, to be frank. Christian girls are like that too. So, but another one is job, right? You know, praying for a better job and more money. And you know, you think about it like that fish, like that buck I got, right? What if the first time I prayed, Lord, I need more money and I want a better job, it just fell in your lap and you didn't acquire any skills, you didn't deserve it, you probably would not feel comfortable. You know, I mean, what if you did that? What if you talked to your boss and said, hey, boss, I want a raise, I want whatever, more. And he just put you in this position. He just, you know, made you his vice president and you got this $1 million raise. And you probably would not feel comfortable. Actually, you wouldn't, because you know you don't deserve it. You know you don't have the skills for it. You didn't earn it, right? So you'd almost feel guilty. And then you'd also feel inadequate because you don't have the skill sets and you didn't acquire the skill sets to earn the job, therefore to even do the job. It wouldn't be a good experience. I don't think it would be. Maybe for some people they would just, you know, screw around and just enjoy the money and that'd be it. But what if that kept happening, right? What if that just kept happening? Like a dystopian type deal. Got everything you ever wanted. It'd probably be horrible. And I think about... Actually, I backtrack. Getting what you want is great, but how you get it, you know. And think of how many times your desires change. How many times you're praying for this one girl, you're like, man, I want this to work out, Lord, and you're trying for it. And then you find out later, you're like, why was I ever interested in her? Like, why? She's not attractive, she's mean, whatever. So that changes too, you know. But yeah, something, you know, it can get really discouraging, especially when it comes to relationships, right? Because it's not like even hunting where, you know, you work on your aim long enough, you get in the right stand, you're probably going to kill something at some point. But with women, it's like, man, you can be working on yourself and it just seems dead. Or they do something because they have the power to just leave you or whatever. And then work, it's just as frustrating sometimes. But, you know, sometimes I don't even know where I'm going with this. But I think the biggest thing is that God wants to answer our desires. That's what I believe. And He's going to answer those desires and those wants. He says He's going to in the Bible. But it's a matter of really wanting them, having that true desire, abiding in Him, and definitely not giving up, like playing our part. You know, I had to go out there to the lake. I had to be there. I had to be present. I had to be in the woods to be able to receive that blessing, right? So depending on what you pray for, I don't know what that looks like. I'm not sure what that looks like. But I think it's put yourself in a position where you can be blessed and don't shut yourself off to opportunities thinking that, oh, it's not going to work out. It's not worth showing up. It's not worth being there. It's not worth applying to that job. It's not worth talking to that girl. It's, you know, don't believe that. That's, you know, that's part of faith, is kind of taking that step of faith, you know. I think that's really essential that we put ourselves in that position to be blessed, to have our prayers answered, because I think God wants to answer them. And he does it in such a long-winded way sometimes. I don't know why. And it's usually in a way we wouldn't expect. But, God's ways are higher than our ways, higher than the heavens are above the earth. So if you think about, hey, I want this thing, right? And God wants you to have that thing. He wants to answer that prayer, okay? It's a good desire. Most of the time, if you're abiding in Him and you keep having it and He hasn't changed your wanting, it's probably a good desire. But, you're human, God's God. So think about any way you would bring that about, right? Any way, oh, I want this. I want a wife, so I'm thinking it's going to be this girl. Or I think I'm going to find her in this way at this time. You can just almost rest assured that and know that it's not going to be at that time with that girl in that way. Because God's not you. So if you think anything, just probability wise, it's not going to line up perfectly with God. And that's something I've been thinking about recently too. It's like, okay, whatever I pray, I'm usually thinking about how it can come, how God might answer it. And that means it's probably not going to happen that way, unless I got super lucky and guessed exactly how God's going to do it. So I just think the biggest thing right now is don't give up, don't stop praying. It's so discouraging. I'm there too. Yeah, it's very discouraging. But, if you really want that buck, if you really want that fish, you're just going to keep going to the lake. You're going to keep going out in the woods. And you're going to keep getting skunked. But, God's going to show you who you need to become to receive that blessing. I think He wants to do it. But it's going to have to happen in a certain way. It's not going to just fall right in your lap. And let's be honest, it's a good thing. What if every time I went out, I prayed for a buck, I got one? I'd have, Illinois has a $2 limit a year. I got my first buck, right? I'm trying to get the second one. Every time I go out, I'm praying for it. But we can only have $2. So what if the hunting year started? I prayed for a good buck every time I went out. Well, first 2 days of hunting, I'm done hunting. At least for bucks. I'm done. And I don't get to enjoy the process of aiming, of practicing my bow, which is fun in and of itself, of getting better and seeing my spread get better and better and doing more research. I'm making a ghillie suit this week. It should come in today, actually. And getting new arrows. And, I wouldn't get to experience any of that because they'd just fall right in my lap. Now, sometimes, we need more money now. Sometimes we're lonely and we need companion now. I don't understand that entirely, but I know there's a reason for it. And I just think it's in a similar way that we're going to keep praying. If we keep praying, God's going to give us what we're asking for. And the wait's going to be worth it. Actually, it's not even just going to be worth it. It's going to be part of the blessing, in a sense. He's going to have made you become a man. Maybe there's certain social inadequacies and there's an awkwardness to you. Or maybe you were super fat and you're praying for this, bombshell of a wife. And God's like, okay, but it's going to be a long journey. It's going to take a few years, for you to, have some health problems that require you to go to the gym and lose some freaking weight. And then, you're going to have some awkward interactions with people. You're going to get fired from your job and some other things that are going to have you self-reflecting and trying to look and, figure out what you have, doing some introspection, and figure out what's wrong with you. And then you're going to address those things. You're going to have some tough conversation with some friends, and they're going to tell you what they think is wrong with you and all that stuff. But you're going to grow from it. You're going to become a better person. And I've seen that in my friend's life. I've seen that in my life. I've known friends that have gotten fired but have grown from it. That have, I don't know, whatever it is. I've experienced that. I've lost friends. I've had my name slandered and sometimes it's hard to understand, why? Why does that happen? But I think the greater the resistance If you can experience a greater resistance, that's how you go anywhere. When you're jumping off the ground, when you're running, you're pushing against the earth. You have that resistance. You need that resistance to accelerate. And then of course they always use the gym example, but it works well. You need that resistance when you're lifting those weights. You need that stress to grow, to get stronger, so you can handle more, handle heavier weights. And I kind of look at it like that, right? And so, in some ways, God may be answering my prayer. He is answering my prayer. See, I still got that mindset in me that's like, is he doing it? But he's answering our prayers, but in a way that grows us, in a way that's even better than what we originally prayed for. And yeah, there's just so much going on, that we don't see. So, yeah, just something that has been on my mind a lot recently, and I'll probably have more thoughts about it and share more, another time, about prayer and whatnot. So, yeah, he wants you to pray. He pleads for us to pray. He commands us to pray. He gets joy when we ask for things. It's not selfish. What father doesn't, when his son asks for a loaf of bread, gives him a stone? No, he wants us to pray, and he's not going to give us something that doesn't meet our expectations. It might be different, but it's not going to be like, oh, well, thanks, God. No, it's going to be something that's good. Probably something that's even better than we expected. So.